So a big announcement earlier that President Trump has paused U.S. military aid just for the time being to Ukraine as he prepares to speak to the nation tonight. A White House official telling Fox News Digital that the president will lay out his plans to end the war between Ukraine and Russia and to restore the peace around the world. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy saying that he is ready to talk and to sign a deal giving the United States access to valuable minerals that are in Ukraine. We saw this whole thing blow up, obviously, on live TV on Friday afternoon. He's trying to get this back to a place where the deal could happen. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance earlier today on Capitol Hill.
But what I think the president has said is that we can make a deal here. The Russians can't continue this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't continue it forever. And most importantly, the United States can't continue it forever.
So joining me now, Rebeccah Heinrichs, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, and Sabrina Singh, former Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary. Great to have both of you with us. Rebeccah, let me start with you. Where do you see this mineral deal right now? And do you think that if it is signed fairly quickly, that pause on aid will be lifted?
That's my hope. And you can see that as soon as that announcement that the aid would be paused, things started moving pretty quickly. And then we saw that long post on X by Zelenskyy saying that he was sorry about the way things went down in the Oval Office. And he's ready to sign the deal. And he's got new security offerings from the UK and other Europeans to provide some other arms to them. So hopefully that means President Trump can announce some progress there, and then we can get arms flowing back into Ukraine.
Yeah, so there have been some moves with regard to Moscow, Sabrina, and let's put these up on the screen, that there's discussion of potentially easing sanctions against Russia to get them to the table, suspending offensive cyber operations to Russia as well, and calls for elections in Ukraine. What are your thoughts on these efforts to get the deal done with Ukraine and entice Russia to the table?
Look, I think you can still get a deal done and find a way to move towards a ceasefire and then a negotiation at the table. But to suspend what is classified operations against Russia when it comes to cyber activity, or to lift sanctions, or to press this point that we should have elections in Ukraine when 20% of Ukraine is still occupied by Russia, I don't exactly understand how you do that. And so I think it's important that that is something that Russia is continuing to push, and that's a talking point that the Kremlin uses, that we need to have these elections, when I'm not sure the last time that Russia or Moscow saw fair and free elections. So it's going to be really hard, especially on the elections front, for Ukraine to instill any type of election process while Russia still occupies its sovereign territory. Yeah,
while the war is going on, it is our understanding from General Jack Keane that they are not legally allowed to hold elections in Ukraine, that's in their constitution, that when they're at war, which they are a lot over the course of history in Ukraine, that's something that they can do. This is J.D. Vance last night with Sean Hannity. Let's take a look at this about the security guarantees.
Look, if you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
So, Rebeccah, I find this whole concept so interesting, and I think we're going to hear more about this tonight. President Trump believes that there are economic and deal solutions that can provide national security, and this is one of them, rather than pushing the idea of war and troops on the ground. Zelenskyy wants hard resources on the ground, but the Trump administration wants to give him a deal that would give us a presence in the country.
Well, I think it's actually going to be something like both of those things. So you want a strong American economic interest, that the American people don't have some abstract idea about defending democracy versus autocracy. They know, understand there are hard benefits, concrete benefits. But I think that Zelenskyy is also going to want the hard power there, because his country is still being invaded. He still has to provide his own defense. And so I think that the Europeans, the UK and the French are really putting some serious offerings there to provide security for Ukraine. I don't think that's anything to sort of push aside or to laugh at. And Ukraine also is going to have their own defensive capability now. Over the last couple of years, they're going to be the most battle-hardened European country, building up their own defense capabilities. And we would expect that any sovereign nation would want to defend themselves in that way.
So, Sabrina, I wanted to ask you about the Friday Oval Office blow-up. And it's very interesting because since then, we've looked back at things that President Biden said at the time, that he was very upset with Zelensky's lack of gratitude about what the United States had done for them. What are your thoughts on that, given what we saw on Friday? Is there any, I mean, it seems like there's a real similarity in the way these two presidents saw Zelensky.
I think there are some, but I think the concerns that the Biden administration raised and some of our concerns with how things were being played out, that was done in private. And what you saw on Friday was something completely astonishing, and I know you covered that pretty extensively. We've never seen sort of this dressing down of a leader that comes to Washington,
D.C. Do you
DC.
agree that Zelensky was combative in that press conference?
I don't think either side really approached that conversation the right way. I think that, Donald Trump is someone that likes the platitudes, likes to see that gratitude on display, and I think you saw.
But Biden also complained about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's fair to say that there was some criticism there, but look, we can't walk away from Ukraine because you know who's not walking away from Russia? Iran and the North Koreans, and you're going to have, at a time where our allyship around the world is being so scrutinized, this is the time to really stay united and rally support for Ukraine. And that I think.
But we've never seen the kind of support from Europe, coming from Europe, that we've seen in the past month.
Yeah, but I think you saw some of that on display in the Oval, and that's why it was such an astonishing meeting.
What I like about this now, though, is that we have seen very publicly how the administration has really, unfortunately, had to turn the screws on Ukraine. This is actually the easy part, Martha. The hard part is now going to be getting the Russians to the table. And so I think now that this has been very public, there's going to be more pressure on Russia now to play ball after all of this played out publicly. The other thing, the Europeans, with the UK and the Europeans combined, have all contributed about $140 billion to Ukraine, and they've also taken on refugees. The United States about $120 billion. So we're the single most provider as a single country, but the Europeans are doing more, and my goodness, after the last 48 hours, you're going to see the Europeans, I think, step up in a major way, which was the whole purpose of President Trump, really urging them to do that.
Yeah, it's tough diplomacy, not soft diplomacy. It's pretty clear, and we'll see where this all heads. Thank you so much, Sabrina and Rebeccah. Great to have you both here. Thank you.